Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Kelly. I am the chief correspondent for Quick Take by Bloomberg. So happy to have you with us for this very special edition of Bloomberg Invest, featuring none other than Henry Kravis. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. If you're having trouble with your audio or video quality, just refresh your browser. Yeah, it's like turning on and off your computer. Sometimes that's all it takes. Also, please engage with us across social media. Use the hashtag Bloomberg Invest. And finally, we'd like to acknowledge CMC Markets as the sponsor of today's event. And with that, let's turn to a man who really needs no introduction. He's one of the best known, most influential and successful global investors. Back in the 1970s, I'm going to make him feel a little bit old, he and his cousin George Roberts, they started a new firm. They left Bear Stearns with their mentor, Jerry Kohlberg. And the rest, as they say, is history. Today, KKR manages more than $234 billion in assets, 20 offices around the world. Its portfolio companies number more than 100. Combined revenue every year about $183 billion. I can't imagine what I was thinking there, Henry. And 753,000 employees across all of its investments. Mr. Kravis, very nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Jason. Good to be with you.
So it's been quite a year. It's been a busy year, and we're going to talk a lot about your view of the world, what you're seeing through the eyes of your partners, through the eyes of the CEOs that you work with, your colleagues and peers. But I'll start by asking you this. If I gave you a fill in the blank and I said the state of the world is, what would you say?
Upside down.
Interesting. Why?
Well, look, we're going through right now a health and an economic crisis. It's not just regional, it's a global crisis. The global pandemic has taken, many lives, unfortunately, and it today still threatens the lives of millions of people around the world. We went through a lull, and it looked like things were better, and now we're back into the teeth of it again as cases are spiking tremendously. Thank goodness that Congress, the Treasury, and the Federal Reserve in the U.S. and other central banks and governments around the world have put an enormous amount of money into the system to make sure that the economies of the various countries didn't collapse. So we're experiencing volatility like we've never seen. Just look at our markets in the U.S. We're up one day, 300-400 points, and then the next day, for almost no reason, we're down 400 to 500 points. Any news coming out of the pharmaceutical industry on progress with a therapeutic or with a vaccine is changing sympathy in the markets. If you have a test going and all of a sudden somebody becomes ill and it doesn't work, they have to slow down the testing that they're doing. All of a sudden, markets react. And so today, I don't remember a time, and I've been investing for over 50 years. I don't remember a time when I've seen such volatility as we see today.
And yet, Henry, and keep me honest here, you have been busier than you've ever been from an investment perspective.
That is true. This has been an incredible year. I'll tell you this, when we shut down our offices in the States about the 12th of March, I was wondering, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to even keep busy? Will we have much of a year at all? And as it turned out, Jason, we have had probably the busiest year and productive year that we've had almost ever. I think it's really in part because of the culture that we have at the firm that has held the firm together, the glue. And it didn't matter whether we're operating from a standpoint of Zoom calls, telephone calls, or in the office. it's that culture of helping each other and working together. And as a result of that, we've been able to invest over $40 billion so far this year across our various products that we have. Now, had you asked me that in March, do you think that's possible? I would have said absolutely not. We weren't. In addition to that, we made a very strategic and very important acquisition in Global Atlantic, which is being acquired for KKR itself for our own balance sheet. It's a strategic move that makes a lot of sense. And that was for about, $4.5+ billion. Transaction presumably will close somewhere the end of the year, early next year.
And what does that allow you to do? Remind us what that deal sort of makes possible for you.
Well, this is a fixed and indexed annuity business and life insurance company. Has in round numbers about $80 billion that becomes permanent capital for KKR. And it enables us to work in partnership with that sleeve now that'll be controlled by KKR and give us new capital that we can put to work in a number of our products. It gives us additional distribution that we don't currently have today. And it gives us stability of earnings and stability of cash flow, which is very important for our business.
So I want to get back in a few minutes to this question of culture, because it's a really important one, I know, to you and to George and to Joe Bay and Scott Nuttall, your co-presidents. But before we do that, I want to go back to something you said, because culture is one thing, your ability to do the deals is one thing, but there have to be deals and smart deals to get done. Have you been surprised at the availability of deals and at the right prices?
Well, the question is your last point, at right prices. That's in the eye of the beholder. And we've turned down a number of investments that looked interesting, but again, at the right price, they would have been interesting to us. So there's been no shortage of opportunity, even though everyone has had to operate on, I call it distance learning or Zoom calls. And as a result of that, we've had, because of how we're set up, because we're a global firm, we've got 21 offices around the world. We have local people in every market. What used to be basically a one product company with very few offices and US and Europe focused, now has many products across the board, from private equity to growth equity to all different types of credit products, infrastructure, real estate, and then we have a capital markets business as well. So that has enabled us to take advantage. You talk about culture. When we set the firm up 44 years ago, 1976, the second conversation that Jerry, George, and I had was, what kind of culture do we want to have? And we concluded immediately we wanted a culture where everyone participated in absolutely everything we did. Whether you worked on a transaction or you didn't, whether you were based in San Francisco where George was, or in New York where Jerry and I were, or whether you were a partner at the firm or you weren't a partner at the firm, you got to participate in everything that we did. Today, here we are 44 years later, many offices, as I told you, many different businesses, as I mentioned. And as a result, the culture is identical to what it is. We talk about that culture all the time. That's our DNA. That is the one thing that keeps us together and keeps us able to grow and help each other significantly.
All right, I'm not going to let you get too far away from deal making for just a minute, though. And, one of the things I've heard you say a number of times over the years, Henry, is don't congratulate me when I buy something, because anybody can buy something if you're willing to pay a certain price, which you alluded to. What about on the other side of the ledger? Have you found the market available to sell assets as well?
We have. We've sold a number of our assets this year. Um, what surprised me is I thought that as we got closer to an election and the possibility of change in capital gains rates some point next year, that there would be more people that would be driven by the capital gains rate. It's interesting. They're driven by that in part, but that's not their highest priority. They're saying we'll sell at the right price at the time that we think is the right time to sell. And so it's not necessarily tax driven today. So we've been somewhat surprised by that. Having said that, don't forget the market took off.
Right.
Once the Federal Reserve started pumping money in and increased their balance sheet by trillions of dollars, all of a sudden spreads tightened, capital was available, and the market started moving up and up and up. And as a result, prices went up significantly from where they had been. Ours is a disciplined business. We at KKR, Jason, have always tried to be as disciplined as possible. You can't fall in love with any business. And yes, our job begins the day we buy a company. And so the way we'll look at a business, if we're talking about private equity, we'll look at it and say, okay, what can we do with this business to make it better? Don't forget, every company is a living organ. It is I call it a movie. It's a series of still shots that make into a movie. And where is that movie going? If you're only going to look at the photo of the company when you're looking at it, and you say, well, this is what it is, and not think about what could it be? How do we make that a better business? How can we get into new geographies and maybe even some new product areas where we're not today? Then you're missing a big part of what private equity is all about. So it's patient capital. It is being able to see where the puck is going, not where it is currently. And if you can anticipate that and then bring in the right group of operating people, which we have at KKR, we have about 80 operating people in KKR Capstone, and we'll bring them in and they will work with the various companies to improve the operations, while at the same time, we'll think about how can we improve the balance sheet, how can we maybe improve pricing, et cetera, supply chain, you name it. There's a long list of what we will do. So it's where's the company going? What can we do with it to make it a better business? And that's why I always say, not to congratulate us when we buy the company. It's congratulate us when we've done something with the business to create much more value, create more jobs, create a more diverse and even geographically dispersed kind of business.
So let's talk about the world a little bit, because as you alluded to, here in the United States, we're seeing a bit of a spike, maybe more than a bit of a spike when it comes to this global health crisis and coronavirus cases. That's not the state of the world, though, and you know that better than I do. As you look across your portfolio, as you talk to your partners, we may be in some semblance of a recovery. In early part, it's unsteady, it's uneven in many ways. How does that influence sort of where you look now and where you put money to work? And I'm thinking especially as you look abroad and maybe starting with Asia.
So look, we look all over the world. Okay, for us, when we started out in Asia, which Joe Bay really kicked off for us in 2005, we went out there with one objective, and that was to become the leading private equity firm in Asia, all the way from Japan down to Australia to Korea to Hong Kong, China, Southeast Asia, and India. Today, our business in India is a very broad business. It encompasses infrastructure, it encompasses real estate, it encompasses credit, growth equity, and private equity. And so, and we have, a very good credit business out there now. So when you have that ability to look at different products And keep in mind, one of the overarching things that I always like to think of, and this was done by design at KKR, we wanted to become a solutions provider for companies in addition to being an investor. It used to be when we go in and see a CEO, we'd walk in and we'd say, introduce ourselves, and about the third or fourth sentence, it was, "Is your company for sale?" And when the CEO said, "No, we're not for sale," there wasn't a lot to talk about. Today, we come at it totally differently. We come out, build the relationship with the management team, find out what they really need. Do they need capital because the banks aren't covering them for some reason anymore? They want to make an acquisition and it's bigger than what they want, so they need a partner for that. And so we will work with them to solve their problem, while at the same time, from our standpoint, we're also investing our own capital right alongside them and into it. We have a capital markets business that is become quite successful. And so by using our own balance sheet at KKR, we're also able to bring the best from what the street has to offer through our own capital markets people. Now, I want to go further than that. So if you're thinking about what is the post-COVID investment life look like, it's not only Asia, of course. They're well ahead of us as far as the recovery is concerned. Their economy is picking up again. You see China now is moved up quite nicely. But it's Europe and it's the US. We believe that a number of consumer trends, in particular, that post-COVID will be here or here to stay. Those that are going to reduce cost, increase convenience, as an example, enhance nesting, personal security is another thing, improve the health and the well-being and the quality of life. All of those are areas that we're focused on. Companies today and governments and for that matter, individuals, consumers, are focused on building resiliency into their systems. So supply chains will end up being much more resilient than they had been. There's infrastructure plays today that weren't necessarily there because of technology and the need for technology. 5G is coming now, of course, and that's going to be another big boost. AI is another area that makes sense. ESG, we're focused very much on ESG in not only as a broad topic, but we are focused on it in each one of our companies. So whenever we're going to buy a company, one of the things that we'll look at, besides the company itself and the macro environment surrounding the company, but we will look at what ESG issues this company may face in the future. What does it have today? And we will build that in to our thinking. You cannot today, in my view, just buy a company and focus on the company alone. You must look at what is the regulatory issues, what kind of issues could affect it, like climate change, right, and so forth. And so we bring all of that to bear on a company, and that's very important. We also look at governmental issues, and as you know, we brought David Petraeus on to head up our KKR Global Institute to focus on different government issues and trends and what we can do to take advantage of those, because we're investing globally. If you had asked me, do I think that we'll ever invest in Ethiopia, Vietnam, the Philippines, I probably would have said no a number of years ago, but those are all countries where we have made investments, and very good investments for that matter. So when you're a global firm, you can do it. So there's plenty of opportunities out there.
Yeah. So let's talk about what David Petraeus is telling you these days, because this is a crazy world, Henry. I don't think I have to tell you that. So as you think about sort of the geopolitical lens with which you have to look, and you have built a team, as you say, to look at, What does he have you most worried about or kind of cautious about?
Look, I'm not going to get into the particulars that we're focused on, Jason, but I will tell you, we talk about the Middle East a lot. What does that mean? Having some kind of agreements coming to bear out there are very important for hopefully potential peace and potential peace with Iran down the road. So we'll focus on that. We're focused on China relations. China is a very important part, but you can't ignore China. China is not going away by any stretch of the imagination. It's going to be there. It's going to be a very important part of our focus, and it's also a very important place where we intend to continue to invest. We've been investing there for probably 12 or so years now, 13 years, and we will continue to do that. So, maybe we got more issues at home than we have, around the world. But you just have to be aware of it. You can't say, okay, we're going to come in and we're only going to invest onshore U.S. You can't do it. The world doesn't work that way, and so we don't look at it that way either. We want to know, what are the disruptors? And it could be a disruptor in technology, could be a disruptor because of a political or geopolitical issue. So that's what we're really looking at. And also where there is disruption in a current geopolitical situation, how do we take advantage of it? What can we do to invest into that?
So I know you are keenly aware of the political issues here at home. You just alluded to them. How do you prepare for an election like this, which feels so momentous? Both personally, it obviously does from a citizen's perspective, but you're a long-term investor. You have to think about your partners. You have to think about your customers. You have to think about the companies that you invest in. How do you sort of pull the team together to map out different scenarios?
Well, we do that, call them war games, call them whatever you want, but you have to put assimilations together. And that's very important whenever you're thinking about investing, and particularly investing around the world. So think about this. We've been in business for 44 years as KKR. George and I have been investing for over 50 years in private equity, started back in the late 1960s through Bear Stearns. And if you think about the different cycles that we have seen, we've seen high interest rates off the chart back in 78, 79. We've seen, deflation. We've seen the global financial crisis in 2008 and 2009. And in this particular downturn, what I will say about KKR is that we were prepared for something to happen. We didn't know what it was going to be. We had, at the point that COVID hit in the U.S., we had gone about 125, 126 months of uninterrupted GDP growth. And that was the most and longest period since 1900 that we've seen in growth in GDP. Trees don't grow to the sky. So, we kicked ourselves a little bit because we missed in part on the global financial crisis. We got some of it right, but we didn't get as much right as we had hoped we would get. And so we said, let's not miss the next one. And we didn't see something that black swan was going to be. The black swan has turned out to be COVID. But we were prepared and we were ready to take advantage. So you're right. We're a long-term investor. Whether Vice President Biden's the president or President Trump is reelected, we're taking a position that we've been through a lot. We'll find opportunities. We just have to make sure our companies are extremely well positioned for whatever may be coming down the road, and then batten down the hatch. When we went into the global financial crisis, George and I said over and over to the people at the firm, and many people had never seen they were young, they'd never seen any downturn, and that was the global financial crisis. And we said, focus on what you can control. Okay, don't spend a lot of time worrying about everything else because you can't do anything about it. So in our case, it was portfolio, portfolio, portfolio. And we said, with that, we know we can control it. Let's make sure we're taking the cost out of the companies. Let's make sure we're refinancing as soon as the capital markets open up. And by the way, it was a fairly short duration until the capital markets started opening up in the global financial crisis. Very steep, but then it bounced back exceptionally fast, as you know. And so we just said, be prepared. Well, it's the same thing this time. We said we've got to be prepared to one, when there's a downturn. And now we're saying to everybody, just make sure your companies are as well capitalized as possible, not over levered. And if you can, take advantage of these markets with very, very low rates to refinance as much of the debt you can in your portfolios in order to get your costs down and push out your maturities.
So, Henry, one of the reasons I love talking to you is because you are always talking to people across the world. You're talking to your peers, you're talking to CEOs, you're talking to world leaders. What's one of the most surprising things you've heard in the conversations you've had of late?
Well, it's interesting. I do talk to a lot of people constantly, and for one, I enjoy it. I think it's eye-opening. I also will say, by the way, that and I say this to young MBA students and others. I say, unless you're curious, I don't think you can be a great investor. You have to be able to see a lot of landscape. And so that's in part why I do it. But yes, I am talking to a lot of different CEOs. And I would say that one of the things that has somewhat surprised me, they initially thought that people would be going back to work in total much quicker than has happened. Honestly, people are worried today. They're very scared about, can I take public transportation? Should I be in the office with other people? What is it all like? So what I'm now seeing or hearing and talking with them is a much more of an attitude of let's wait and see. Let's not rush back in to the office. The second thing that I'm hearing, and this is something that we've been very focused on and very concerned about for a long time, and that's mental health. It's one of the great illnesses, unfortunately, that goes unnoticed, and not enough attention is paid to it. So in our case at KKR, what we've done, and I feel it's paid off, it's very important, is, we've had different doctors come in, psychiatrists, psychologists come in and talk to us about what we should be doing as a firm, all the employees they should be thinking about. We've invited our company, in our portfolio companies, the executives, to come and talk here as well. And so this is very important. It's not only for themselves, but it's also for children. How are children going to react? And now I'm hearing a lot of that. For example, I was talking to one CEO last week, and he was telling me that he was taking a look at where their expenditures in healthcare were, where are their employees getting reimbursements, and he was surprised that the number of people that are applying for medicine or medication for depression had gone up significantly there. And he said, he's probably right, he said, I'm sure it's probably much more than what these numbers are showing, because he said a lot of people won't talk about it, don't want to, they may pay for it themselves, the medicine, as opposed to asking for reimbursement because they don't want anybody to know. But I will tell you, this is a huge issue, and the longer that the lockdown goes on, and if we get back into another lockdown there, and restaurants and small businesses have to close, that anxiety is only going to increase significantly.
And so how do you think, taking all of that into account, Henry, and talking as you do with all of those leaders, how do you run the firm differently sort of now and on the other side of this? I mean, you, as you've discussed, you take so much pride and you think so much about the company's culture, beyond steps like that. How's KKR different on the other side of this?
Look, I don't know how different we are, but I'll tell you one thing for sure is that we care about our employees. We're going to do everything we possibly can to make sure of their health and welfare that it's taken care of, and we reach out to all of the people constantly, the senior people at the firm, in meeting with them. We'll have a number of conversations where we're bringing in people like Dr. Stephen Ostroff, who used to be the chief scientist at the FDA, and he comes and talks to us to just assure people that things are okay. We will get through this somehow. I'm saying it all the time. This too will pass, and it will. It's just going to take time. There's no quick solution to this today, and it's something that is extremely important. Now, there's another piece to this that everybody is talking about. Every CEO I talk about, besides the mental health and getting back to work, and that's diversity. This is an extremely high priority today for all of us. And I will say over and over again, it starts at the top. If the CEOs don't take it seriously and the CEOs don't work toward building a diverse and inclusive culture and group of employees, you're missing out. One of the things that I like to say to our firm, and I've said it many times over the years, is we need diversity of ethnicity, gender, and thought. And all three of them are important. We don't want all the people looking the same, coming from the same backgrounds. You're not going to have much of a firm if you do that. And so there's a wonderful program that is now being undertaken by Ken Frazier's leading it from Merck through the Business Council, where he's getting companies to sign up to agree that over the next 10 years, they will hire, million or more people of color and minorities, because if the top starts it and makes up their mind that this is something they're going to do, we can start making some progress. But what I worry about is that this idea, this focus today could very well start to die down. And I'm hoping that it doesn't, because this is the opportunity for all of us as leaders of large corporations to make a difference. And it's long overdue. We will make the difference if we put our mind to it. So what we're doing at KKR, we're doing everything from focusing on supply chain management at our different companies. We to make sure that minority suppliers are included, just like everybody else. We are focused very much on trying to ensure that our boards of directors of our portfolio companies have at least two diverse directors. And I'm happy to say that we've hired over 100 today, diverse people with diverse backgrounds as directors in our companies, particularly in the U.S. And it's something that's very important. Again, as I say, it starts at the top. And if the boards of directors have diversity, they will hold the managements accountable. And I think that's an extremely important thing as well. And then lastly, I would say we are teaming up with organizations like SEO and Harlem Capital, which is a minority-owned private equity firm, to see where we can be helpful in hiring more of these students from college that are coming out, want to get into the workforce, how we can put them to work.
Along those lines, I think about some of the things that you have done philanthropically, and you and I had a great conversation earlier this year with William Goodloe, the president of SEO, and I recommend that conversation to everybody who's listening. It was a great Bloomberg Live event as part of our Equality Summit. I also know that you have been very philanthropic over the years as well. You've been very generous to Columbia Business School, your alma mater. How are you thinking about philanthropy differently these days, if at all?
Philanthropy to me is a very personal decision. I had a conversation a number of years ago, now probably 30 odd years ago, with David Rockefeller, and I had lunch with him, and I think David was one of the best philanthropists that I've ever known anyway. And I said, David, what should I be thinking about? I'm now making a little money. I didn't have any before, but I've been making a little money now, and I'd like to start giving some of it away and giving, they call it giving back to society. And he gave me a very good piece of advice. He said, whatever you do, Henry, get involved. He said, don't just write a check. He said, sure, there'll be those organizations where a friend of yours is asking you to make a donation, and you'll do that. But pick a few organizations that mean a lot to you and get involved. Yes, you're going to write the check, but give them your best thinking. And it's exactly what I've done. I've done it, I've done it almost my whole life. And I have to say, it's probably one of the most enjoyable things that I've ever done in watching people, particularly underserved community, say, you've made a difference in my life. So I started something 22 years ago now that I thought was really important for New York, called the New York City Investment Fund. And it was set up with the idea of the private sector working together in it, build a network to help finance and basically be the investor of last resort for companies in the inner city. The whole idea was not to make a lot of money. The idea was obviously not to lose it, but the idea was to create jobs. And I went out, I wanted to raise $100 million at $1 million each from 100 corporations and individuals in New York. And the first 53 company CEOs that I spoke to, I was able to raise $52 million at $1 million each. And I stopped then because I got nervous. I said, well, maybe we can't put this money to work. And so I said, let's wait and let's start investing. And that's exactly what we did, and never had to go back and raise any more money. And it's up to maybe $170 million now because there's been some profit in it. But more importantly, we've created thousands of jobs in New York City alone, and particularly in the underserved and underdeveloped communities of New York City. I'd love doing that. SEO, wow, I can go on and talk about SEO
Right.
forever. I won't, but I will say it's one of the best organizations focused on education of 9th grade through college that I've ever seen there. And I became chairman of that about 7 years ago. And it's an organization that works. They've been around 57 years. So I got there. I started a company to focus on drug and substance abuse, because I used to think that was one of the biggest issues that we faced. I still think it is. And it was middle school focus for kids. I got that started. And one little boy came up to my wife, Mary Jose, and me at a little cocktail party they had given for us. And he said, Mr. and Mrs. Kravis, you have saved my life. And I said, first of all, how old are you? And he said, well, I'm in the 8th grade. I said, how did we save your life? He said, well, I was on drugs. And because of your program, I am off drugs. And I promise you, Mr. and Mrs. Kravis, I will never, ever go back on drugs again. And as far as I was concerned, it was a home run.
Right.
If we could save one young man from getting on drugs, and where he understood the difference, that was a success. And science is another area that we're very involved in and have a big focus, and that is what we do at Memorial Sloan Kettering in setting up the Center for Molecular Oncology. Very important for us. Education, in addition, higher education, in addition to what I do with SEO, very involved in a number of universities and some boarding schools. And so, and the arts, we've
Right.
been very involved in the arts for years. So you pick your areas that you want. And I tell you, it's been the most enjoyable thing that I've been able to do. And thank goodness I'm in a position to be able to help. I always struggle with people that don't want to give anything back. I said, well, you can't take it with you. And just think about the pleasure you're going to get.
Mhm.
And with many people, it just doesn't register, unfortunately.
So I want to wrap up by taking you back to where we started, because we were talking about the early history, and I want to ask you, if I can, about your relationship with your cousin, George Roberts. I mean, it is one of the most unique and, I dare say, sort of special relationships across the investing world. And I know you could talk about it for the rest of the day, and I would love to hear it. But how do you distill that down? How do you distill that partnership down? And how do you sort of invest that, as it were, into the culture of the firm?
Let me put it in perspective. First of all, George and I met when we were about 2 years old. George's father and my mother were brother and sister. And so they were close, and therefore the families got together a lot. George grew up in Houston. I grew up in Tulsa. And so we spent a lot of time together. And George and I just hit it off. We went to college together out at Claremont McKenna. And in the summers, we lived together in New York. George was working at Bear Stearns, and I was working at Goldman Sachs. And we grew up together like brothers, practically. And, it's very simple. If you have the same objectives, you trust each other, and you're going toward the same goal, you can go a long way. And particularly if you never worry about who gets credit. And I always want George to get credit, and he wants me to get credit. And it's a unique relationship. People say, oh, you can't run a company with two people. Well, we've only done it for 44 years and seems to have worked out okay. And so it's been great. I'm often asked, well, you two must fight a lot. I said, yeah, we do. I think the last fight we had, both of us were 7 years old. He wanted to ride my brand new bicycle that had just arrived for Christmas, and I wanted to ride it. And I got chased in the house because I wasn't very nice to him. And I ran to the corner of a wall, and I cracked my head open and had 27 stitches. That's about the last fight we've ever had. I guess I learned the hard way. But seriously, it is an exceptional relationship, built on trust, built on respect. He has his strengths and weaknesses. I have my strengths and weaknesses, and we know what they are. And we're never trying to elbow the other one out of the way. And that's the message we try to get just by our actions throughout the firm. Hey, we're there for each other. We're there to support each other and trying to make sure that we're doing the best for the firm, our employees, and the people that really entrust us with their capital. And those are pensioners that give us an enormous amount of capital from the pension funds where we raise money over the years. So, I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's been the best partnership. He's my best friend. It's just something that's just been fantastic.
All right, before I let you go, I have to ask you a question I've asked just about everybody I've interviewed of late. We're 8 months into this. None of us have been in our offices in any meaningful way together for 8 months now, since March. We don't know how much longer this is going to go on. So I'll probably ask you the same question months from now. But right now, as you look back across those 8 months, everything that's happened in the world, everything that's happened around you, to our country, to our world, how do you think you've changed? What's changed you?
I think what has changed me is I probably have become more patient than I was. I've always been known to be impatient, and given patience I probably have become better at that. Probably my empathy levels have gone up, and trying to show more empathy toward everybody that I come in contact with, people at our firm, and make sure they're okay. And it's also made me think, what's important? As you see so many people in the U.S., New York City in particular, earlier on, one become ill, and so many of them pass away. And then it makes you think about what's really important in life. And to me, it's family. My wife, without a doubt, Mary Jose, my cousin and partner, George Roberts, other best friends that I have, and I have several. And the importance of those, the importance of relationships. It just has, I think, taught me this is something that you never, ever should take for granted.
Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. This has been Bloomberg Invest Talks, a special conversation with Henry Kravis. My thanks to him. Also like to thank CMC Markets for making today's event possible. If you'd like more information on them, please go to the handout tab right there on your screen. For ongoing coverage and other stories, of course, you can always go to Bloomberg.com. Follow Bloomberg on Twitter at Bloomberg Live, at Business, and I dare say at QuickTake. I'm Jason Kelly, New York. Thanks so much.